Most people think empires fall because of wars, or revolutions, or bad leadership. They're wrong. Empires don't collapse from the outside, they collapse from the inside. And the mechanism is always the same. It starts with debt, it ends with debasement. And in between, there's a mathematical spiral that no amount of political will can stop. The Athenian Empire lasted 2 centuries. The Ottoman Empire, 6. The French monarchy ruled for 800 years. All of them followed the same pattern. All of them denied it was happening. All of them believed they were different. They weren't. And neither is China. Right now, in 2026, the world's second-largest economy is entering the final phase of a debt cycle that has destroyed every empire that came before it. The numbers are public. The pattern is undeniable. But most people won't see it until it's too late. Because here's what they don't teach you in school. Empires don't die from external threats. They die from internal math. And the math always wins. When an empire borrows more than it can repay, it faces 2 choices: default and lose credibility, or debase the currency and destroy savings. Every empire in history has chosen debasement, every single one. And every single one believed they could manage it. Athens debased the silver drachma, Rome clipped coins, the Ottomans inflated the akçe, France printed assignats, Weimar Germany ran the printing presses until money became wallpaper. Each time the empire told its citizens, "This is temporary, this is necessary, this is different." It never was. And now China is walking the same path. The debt-to-GDP ratio is officially 280%. Unofficially, it's closer to 350%. Local governments are buried in hidden liabilities. The property sector, representing 30% of GDP, is collapsing. Shadow banks are failing, and the People's Bank of China is caught between 2 impossible choices. Let deflation destroy the economy, or print money and destroy the currency. This isn't speculation. This is pattern recognition. Because the empire debt spiral isn't a theory, it's a formula. And once you see the formula, you can't unsee it. The spiral has 4 stages: expansion, overextension, desperation, collapse. Every empire enters stage 1 the same way, with a golden age, economic growth, military dominance, currency confidence. The empire borrows cheaply because everyone believes it will last forever. But golden ages create a trap. They encourage borrowing. They reward expansion. They make leaders believe debt doesn't matter. And by the time they realize it does, they're already in stage 2. Overextension. The empire has borrowed so much that servicing the debt consumes more and more of its revenue. Growth slows. Tax revenue stagnates, but obligations don't. Pensions, military spending, infrastructure, bureaucracy. The empire can't cut spending without triggering unrest, and it can't raise taxes without killing what's left of growth. So it borrows more. And the debt compounds. That's when stage 3 begins. Desperation. The empire starts printing money. Not because it wants to, because it has to. Because the math no longer works. Because creditors demand payment and there's no other way. At first it's subtle, a little inflation, a little currency debasement. Leaders promise it's temporary. Economists argue it's manageable. But debt doesn't care about promises, and markets don't care about arguments. The currency weakens, imports become expensive, inflation accelerates, savings evaporate. And the public, who trusted the system, realizes they've been robbed. That's when stage 4 arrives. Collapse. Not always sudden, sometimes slow, but always inevitable. The empire loses currency credibility. Trade partners demand hard assets instead of paper. The military can't be funded. The bureaucracy fractures. And the empire that once seemed invincible fragments into something smaller, poorer, weaker. This has happened dozens of times, and every time the people in power said the same thing: it can't happen here. But it did. And it is. Because China isn't building a new system, it's repeating an old one. And the spiral has already begun. Athens, 454 BC. The Delian League treasury is moved from Delos to Athens. Officially, it's for protection. Unofficially, it's theft. The treasury held contributions from nearly 200 city-states. Silver paid to defend Greece against Persian invasion. But once the Persian threat faded, Athens didn't return the money. It spent it on temples, on fleets, on the Parthenon. Pericles called it investment. The allies called it empire. And for 50 years, it worked. Athens became the richest, most powerful city-state in the Greek world. Its navy controlled the Aegean. Its culture dominated philosophy, theatre, and architecture. But the Golden Age was built on borrowed trust. Because Athens wasn't generating wealth, it was extracting it. The silver flowed in from the empire, and Athens spent it faster than it arrived. When allies resisted, Athens sent warships. The system worked as long as everyone believed Athens would win every war. Then came the Peloponnesian War, 30 years of conflict, enormous cost. And halfway through, Athens ran out of money. The treasury was empty, the allies were exhausted, and Athens faced a choice: admit defeat or debase the currency. They chose debasement. In 407 BC, Athens began minting coins with a copper core and a thin silver coating. The silver drachma, trusted across the Mediterranean for centuries, became a fraud. Merchants noticed immediately. They refused Athenian coins. Trade collapsed. Allies defected. And Athens, unable to fund its navy or pay its soldiers, lost the war. By 404 BC, the Athenian Empire was over. Not because Sparta was stronger, but because Athens destroyed its own currency. The lesson was clear: empire requires trust, and trust requires sound money. But the lesson was forgotten. Because 70 years later, Rome made the same mistake. Rome, 200 AD. The Roman Empire stretches from Britain to Mesopotamia. It's the largest political entity in human history. Its currency, the silver denarius, is the global reserve. But the empire has a problem. It's expensive. The legions require pay. The roads require maintenance. The grain dole requires subsidy. The bureaucracy requires funding, and Rome's expansion has stopped. There are no new conquests, no new plunder, no new tributaries. So the emperors borrow, from the Senate, from merchants, from the future, and when borrowing isn't enough, they debase. In 64 AD, Nero reduces the silver content of the denarius from 95% to 85%. Citizens barely notice. The coins still look the same. But the precedent is set. Over the next 2 centuries, every emperor facing a budget crisis does the same thing. A little less silver, a little more copper, just enough to pay the bills. By 200 AD, the denarius is 50% silver. By 270 AD, it's 5%. By 300 AD, it's not silver at all. It's a bronze coin with a silver wash. And the Roman economy collapses. Prices spike, trade disintegrates. Farmers abandon their land because crops aren't worth the debased coins. The legions mutiny because their wages buy nothing. Diocletian tries to fix it with price controls. The Edict of Maximum Prices, 301 AD. It lists the official price for everything from wheat to prostitutes. The black market explodes overnight. Goods vanish from official markets. Merchants hoard, and inflation accelerates. Because you can't legislate away currency debasement, you can only hide the consequences until they become catastrophic. By the time Constantine creates the gold solidus in 312 AD, Rome has already lost half its territory. The empire splits, the western half collapses within 150 years. Not because of barbarians had always been there, but because Rome destroyed its money, and without money, you can't fund an empire. The pattern repeats. Constantinople, 1453. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern successor to Rome, has survived for 1,000 years. It's outlasted the Western Empire, the Arab Caliphate, the Crusader states. But by the 15th century, it's a shell. The empire controls only Constantinople and a few scattered territories. The Ottomans surround it. The economy is dying, and the treasury is empty. The Byzantine gold solidus, once the world's most trusted currency, has been debased so many times it's nearly worthless. Emperors melted down church treasures, sold titles, borrowed from Italian bankers at ruinous rates. But debt doesn't care about history. When Mehmed II besieged Constantinople in 1453, the Byzantine Empire couldn't afford to pay its defenders. Genoese mercenaries demanded payment in gold. The emperor had none. They left. The walls fell. the empire ended, not because the Ottomans were unstoppable, but because Byzantium couldn't pay its bills, and the Ottomans learned nothing from it. Istanbul, 1700. The Ottoman Empire now rules the lands Byzantium once held. It stretches from Hungary to Yemen, from Algeria to Baghdad. But the Golden Age is over. The empire hasn't won a major war in decades. European powers are advancing. The Janissaries, once the world's most feared infantry, are now a corrupt, bloated bureaucracy that riots when it's not paid. And the empire is drowning in debt. The Ottoman silver akçe has been debased for 2 centuries. What once contained 1.5 grams of silver now contains 0.1 grams. Prices have increased 20-fold. Soldiers mutiny. Provincial governors declare independence. And the empire borrows from European bankers to survive. By 1875, half of Ottoman government revenue goes to servicing foreign debt. In 1876, the empire defaults. The Ottoman Public Debt Administration is created, a European-controlled agency that collects Ottoman taxes and sends them to Paris and London. The empire becomes a debt colony. It survives in name, but it's functionally controlled by its creditors. And in 1922, it collapses. Not because of World War I, the war was a symptom. The empire collapsed because it debased its currency, borrowed beyond its capacity, and lost financial sovereignty. The pattern doesn't change, only the names do. Paris, 1789. France is the richest, most powerful nation in Europe. Its culture dominates the continent. Its military has no equal. But the treasury is empty. Decades of war, against Britain, against Austria, against Prussia, have drained the coffers. The American Revolution, funded by France, cost 1.3 billion livres. That's more than double the annual revenue of the French state. The debt is unsustainable. Interest payments consume 50% of tax revenue. King Louis XVI tries reforms. He tries new taxes. He tries borrowing more. None of it works. So in 1789, he calls the Estates General, the first meeting of France's legislative body in 175 years. It's supposed to solve the debt crisis. Instead, it triggers revolution. Because when the public realizes the empire is broke, trust collapses. The revolutionaries seize power. They confiscate church lands. They print a new currency, the assignat, backed by the seized property. At first it works. Assignats hold value. The government funds itself. But then the wars begin. France fights Austria, Prussia, Britain, Spain, and the printing press is run. In 1790, 400 million assignats are in circulation. By 1795, it's 40 billion. The assignat loses 99% of its value. Bread riots erupt, hyperinflation destroys savings, and Napoleon rises from the chaos, not because of ideology, but because France needs someone to restore order. He does, by abandoning the assignat and creating the gold franc. But the damage is done. Millions are impoverished. The monarchy is gone. And France's dominance in Europe ends, all because of debt, all because of debasement. The lesson is written in history, but no one in power ever seems to read it. Weimar Germany, 1923. The Treaty of Versailles demands reparations. Germany owes 132 billion gold marks, an impossible sum. The Weimar government tries to pay. It borrows, it taxes, it begs for extensions. But the debt is designed to be unpayable. So Germany prints money. In 1914, $1 buys 4.2 marks. In January 1923, $1 buys 18,000 marks. By November 1923, $1 buys 4.2 trillion marks. Workers are paid twice a day because prices double between morning and afternoon. People carry money in wheelbarrows. Children play with stacks of worthless bills. Savings evaporate. The middle class is destroyed. And in the chaos, extremism rises. The Weimar Republic collapses, the Nazis take power, and 12 years later, the world is at war, not because of one man, but because of a currency crisis that destroyed an entire society's trust in the system. And the world swore it would never happen again, but it keeps happening, because the incentives never change. Beijing, 2026. China is the world's second largest economy. It's the largest trading nation. It holds $3 trillion in foreign reserves. It's built more infrastructure in 20 years than America built in a century. But the cracks are showing. Evergrande defaults, then Country Garden, then Sunak, then dozens of smaller developers. The property sector, which accounts for 30% of GDP and 70% of household wealth, is in free fall. Local governments, which borrowed trillions through off-balance sheet vehicles, can't service the debt. Provincial defaults are accelerating. Youth unemployment is officially 21%. Unofficially, it's closer to 40%. The government stops publishing the data. Foreign investment is fleeing. Capital controls are tightening, and the yuan is weakening despite constant intervention. China's total debt to GDP ratio is officially 280%. But that doesn't include hidden local government liabilities, state-owned enterprise debt, or shadow banking exposure. Add those in, and the real number is closer to 350%. It's higher than Japan in 1990, higher than the US in 2008, higher than any major economy in modern history. And China's growth is slowing. The working-age population is shrinking. Productivity growth has stalled, which means China faces the same choice every empire before it has faced: default or debase. Default means social unrest. Local governments can't pay workers. Pensions collapse. Protests spread. Debasement means inflating away the debt, printing money, weakening the currency, destroying savings. China is already choosing debasement. The People's Bank of China has cut reserve requirements 16 times since 2018. It's injecting liquidity through lending facilities with names like MLF, SLF, and PSL. It's not calling it money printing. But that's what it is, and the consequences are predictable. The yuan will weaken, inflation will rise, capital flight will accelerate, and China's role as the world's factory will erode as production moves to Vietnam, India, Mexico. This isn't speculation. This is the empire debt spiral. Stage 1 was complete when China became the world's largest creditor and manufacturer. Stage 2 began when debt-fueled growth hit diminishing returns. Stage 3 started when the property bubble burst and local governments ran out of options. Stage 4 is beginning now, and it will reshape the global economy for the next 50 years. The pattern never changes because the incentives never change. Empires borrow during golden ages because growth makes debt look cheap. They overborrow during stagnation because cutting spending triggers unrest. They debase during crisis because default means admitting failure. And they collapse when the currency loses credibility because trust, once broken, cannot be legislated back into existence. Every empire believes it's different, better educated, more advanced, more sophisticated. But math doesn't care about sophistication. When debt grows faster than the economy, the system becomes unstable. When money creation exceeds productive capacity, inflation follows. When savers lose faith, capital flees. These are laws, not theories. And China is subject to the same laws Athens, Rome, Constantinople, the Ottomans, France, and Weimar were subject to. The difference is scale. China's economy is 40 times larger than Weimar's. It's the central node in global supply chains. It holds more US debt than any nation except Japan, which means when China's debt spiral reaches stage 4, it won't just reshape China. It will reshape everything. Here's what most people miss. Empires don't collapse because of debt. They collapse because of the response to debt. Debt is just numbers. But debasement is betrayal. When a government inflates the currency, it's stealing from everyone who saved in that currency. Workers, retirees, the middle class, anyone who trusted the system. And when people realize they've been robbed, not by criminals, but by their own government, trust evaporates. That's when empires fracture, not from external conquest, but from internal disillusionment. Because the social contract isn't written, it's felt, and it's built on one implicit promise. If you work hard, save money, and follow the rules, you'll be okay. Currency debasement breaks that promise. It tells workers their wages are worth less every year. It tells retirees their savings won't last. It tells the middle class their only hope is to speculate, not save. And when trust in the system dies, the system itself dies. That's what happened in Athens, in Rome, in Constantinople, in Istanbul, in Paris, in Weimar. And that's what's beginning in Beijing. The global implications are staggering. If China's economy contracts, global trade contracts with it. Supply chains built over 30 years won't reroute overnight. If the yuan devalues sharply, every currency tied to China's economy, across Asia, Africa, Latin America, will face pressure. If China dumps US treasuries to defend the yuan, interest rates spike. If it doesn't, the yuan collapses. There's no clean exit, only choices between bad outcomes and worse ones. And this isn't decades away. The property collapse is happening now. Local government defaults are accelerating now. Capital flight is intensifying now. The debt spiral doesn't wait for permission. Most people won't see it until it's over. They'll hear about a Chinese recession, or a currency adjustment, or a debt restructuring. They won't hear the word collapse, not until it's obvious, because governments and media don't announce collapses. They announce challenges, they announce transitions, they announce new phases. But history doesn't care what you call it. A debt spiral is a debt spiral. A currency crisis is a currency crisis. And when the math stops working, the words stop mattering. The empire debt spiral isn't a theory. It's a pattern, a formula, a law as reliable as gravity. Borrow beyond your capacity, print to service the debt, debase the currency, lose trust, collapse. Athens did it. Rome did it. Byzantium did it. The Ottomans did it. France did it. Weimar did it. And now China is doing it. Not because its leaders are foolish, but because the incentives leave no other choice. You can't cut spending without unrest. You can't raise taxes without killing growth. You can't default without destroying credibility. So you print, you inflate, you debase, and you hope, against all historical evidence, that this time will be different. But this time is never different. The math always wins. 50 years from now, historians will write about this moment. They'll describe the Chinese debt spiral the same way we now describe Rome's currency debasement or Weimar's hyperinflation. They'll call it inevitable, predictable, obvious in hindsight, and they'll wonder why no one saw it coming. But people do see it. The data is public. The pattern is undeniable. The difference is, seeing it and stopping it are two different things. Because stopping the spiral requires doing what no empire in history has ever done, choosing short-term pain over long-term collapse. It requires cutting spending during stagnation, letting insolvent banks fail, accepting lower growth, allowing deflation to clear malinvestment. It requires political courage, public sacrifice, and a willingness to endure hardship now to avoid catastrophe later. No empire has ever made that choice. Not because they were stupid, but because the political cost of austerity is immediate and the cost of debasement is delayed. Leaders respond to incentives, and the incentive is always to print, not to cut, which is why the pattern repeats, and why it will repeat again. The empire debt spiral isn't a warning, it's a fact. China isn't approaching the spiral, it's in it. And what happens next won't be decided by policy statements or political speeches. It will be decided by math. Because debt doesn't negotiate, and markets don't wait for permission. Athens thought it was different. Rome thought it was different. Constantinople thought it was different. The Ottomans thought it was different. France thought it was different. Weimar thought it was different. They were all wrong. And so is China. The only question left is how long it takes for the rest of the world to realize it.